All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the stream. I hope everybody is doing well tonight. We are going to pick up where we left off last time and talk a little bit about how we're going to represent the player both in the world as well as in general in terms of things like player state, health, anima levels, stuff like that, right? So that's kind of the goal tonight is to kind of at least plan out a little bit how we want to represent that, as well as start thinking about global game state as a whole. Because right now it's kind of just a melting pot of different options and other states for systems and things like that. So we need some sort of way to track our progress through the game, and we're going to need that fairly early on. So we need to start thinking about that now. And so that's what we're going to do. And I also want to talk about a couple of other things that I want to address, probably offline, but I want to bring them up here. Before we do that, though, I do want to just take a quick second to thank the supporters of the channel, starting with our elite partner, Javier Alazaron. That is the highest tier of subscription over on YouTube memberships and Patreon. I'd also like to thank our partners who are the next tier over there on Patreon and YouTube memberships. They are Gerbullies Inc. and Matt Osgard. And I would like to also thank all the other supporters listed on the screen here. They're a combination of the other tiers of support over on Patreon, YouTube subscriptions, and I should say YouTube memberships and Twitch subscriptions. Mix that up. So thank you all very much for your support. It greatly helps, and I really, really appreciate it. It's going to help me offset some of the costs of the project. So I also would be remiss if I didn't thank all of the viewers, whether you're joining us here live, either on the YouTube side or the Twitch side. Without you guys, neither one of these channels would exist, and thus the project wouldn't exist. So thank you guys very much for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. All right. Singy, how's it going? Good to see you over there. Mr. Linux Freak. I love the name, by the way. Just finished installing SAS in my app. Oof. Every time I try to install, it's completely different. Yep. I understand that struggle. For sure. All right. Ruche dropping the emotes over there. Appreciate that. Dr. Elliot, how's it going? Woohoo. Tammin, good to see you as well. Smudge, also good to see you. Welcome, everyone. All right. So, just want to confirm over on the Twitch side, is everything coming across clear? You guys can see my screen and whatnot and hear me okay? Because the preview here is just kind of borked and I can't really monitor it. So I just want to make sure that it's all good on that side. The YouTube looks like it's fine. So if one of you guys could let me know. Let's see. Are you a streamer other than platform than YouTube only? Yeah, so I do stream on Twitch as well as YouTube. Yep, so I do both. And I do keep an eye on both chats. If they're pretty active, sometimes I have a difficult time keeping up with it because we do a lot of programming here. But, usually what I do is I do a little bit of programming and then I come back to chat. And I'll check both chats when I'm doing that. So I've got them here on separate monitors. That's why I keep pointing like I do. But yeah. All right. So what we kind of touched on last time was we were kind of loosely discussing how we wanted to represent the player in the world. And so if we take a look at one of the zones, we'll just go with zone 00. I should have split that first. Let me bring back up the Illumina main over here. Okay, so right now what we're doing is this. And I thought about trying to fix that last night, but I'm going to hold off on that for a reason that I'll discuss here in a bit. So for right now, basically what we have is this is our scene configuration file, right? So we've got our node hierarchy with all of our attachments, all that good stuff. And we essentially have to have this in each individual scene, which is obviously stupid, right? We obviously don't want to do that long term. So we are going to come up with a solution for this, but we're not going to do that tonight. What we're going to focus on instead is we are going to move the tracking of these things. So we had a handle to this outer node as well as its X form, and I think we even had a reference to the inner node and its X form as well. So we'll go ahead and move those references to track them in our proper state that we're going to create tonight. So we're not tackling this tonight. I guess I could talk about it now before we jump into that. So one of the things that we were kind of looking at last night, and you guys may have noticed I was kind of tripping over some things and like how do I want to implement this and so forth, is our scenes need some attention, basically. And so right now, the way that we did this was trending towards a data-oriented sort of concept, but not completely, right? And so our data is kind of fragmented, and the way that it's represented really isn't ideal, right? And so we have these references to all these different structures that exist in different places in the code base, which is bad, obviously. And then we have these attachments that are referenced by the same index within these different arrays, which is fine. But then we also have this concept of a hierarchy graph that's created in here, which is separate from our transform system, which is what manages our transforms. And initially I did this because I thought that it would be a good idea to separate concerns out of the two. But now I'm kind of rethinking that solution a little bit because everything that we do with hierarchy has to do with handles, and everything we do with X forms has to do with handles. And it's actually not quite as clean to manage as I was kind of hoping it would be. So as we've talked about a lot of times, we kind of try things on the channel and see what works, what doesn't work. And I think having that hierarchy graph, it's not ever really going to get used outside of the context of a scene. And in addition to that, the X form system also really isn't going to be used outside the context of a scene. Now you could use these things individually if you wanted to, if you didn't want to use the scene at all, but I just don't think that they worked out quite the way that I want them to. So what I'm going to do, and I'm probably going to do this offline, I'm not going to take up a lot of stream time with this, is I'm actually going to refactor the way that scenes work. And I'm going to make this a lot more flexible, a lot more of a data-oriented approach, so that all of the data for like types of attachments is all together, but in a way that is cache-friendly, and also easier to work with within the actual scene itself. And we're going to work on the API to make that a little bit easier to use as well. And so, yeah, we're going to wind up doing that offline. So I'm not going to do any further work in the scene for right now. And what we're going to do is we're going to have this new K scene that is going to be a drop-in replacement for scene. So I'm going to develop it in tandem alongside what we already have here. And then when we're ready to switch over to that, we will go ahead and switch over to that. What that means is essentially we're just going to cut over from one system to the other. However, I don't think at this point the configuration is going to change. I'm pretty happy with the way that scene configuration came out, so I don't think that this needs to change, at least at this point. In terms of how this is formatted, how it works, how you can, sort of, have this hierarchy of nodes and attachments and so forth. So I think this is good. This is definitely the direction we want to keep going, but the scene definitely needs some work. So I want to simplify it. I want to make it a lot more lean, so yeah, that is basically why I chose to kind of put this to the side for right now, and I'm playing with some ideas offline of how I want to handle that. So, all right, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Welcome. Let's see. Link, please. Can't find. Yeah, I can toss you a link. Give me 1 second. It is... drop it here in chat for you. Oh, it's the short link. You know what? I don't want to do that. I'll just type it out manually. So the channel name is basically the same as, it's the same as what it is for YouTube, right? It's just Twitch TV in front of it. But yeah, there you go. Okay. Found, I'm here already. How's it going, Knight? First time chatter. Welcome, by the way. Are you from the other side? Yeah, okay, I gotcha. Like I said, sometimes it takes me a minute to get to the messages, right? So, yeah, it is you. Okay. Cool. From Link, good evening over there on the YouTube side. How's it going? All right, so what we're going to do, like I said, is we are going to manage this. We're just going to keep this as is, and we are going to add that to the actual game state. So when we talk about game state, we need to have a look at what that means. So we've got some hacks in here for gameplay stuff, right? So we have like our context-sensitive text. That's fine to leave in here. So what we really want is we want two different forms of state, right? So we have sort of the application state, which I'm kind of thinking I should rename this more to application state than anything else. So we kind of want an application state, and then we want a inner game state. And what that basically means, the difference between the two, is the game state is something that we're eventually going to serialize to a file to save on disk. And that will obviously save your progress throughout the game. So it'll contain all the flags of all the different things that we do in terms of changing things in the world or completing quests or any of that kind of stuff. It'll contain all of those things, you know, your inventory, your equipment, all those different things. And then, you know, sort of the application state is going to be the active state of stuff. So that's going to be, you know, where our key maps are loaded. Looks like we still have some different camera stuff here we kind of need to update. So it's going to be things that are sort of active within the game, but don't actually get serialized out to state, right? To a file that we actually save. Okay, so with that, we do have game state here, which I guess we could probably go, you know what, let me open Illumina types over here and go Illumina main here. And basically everywhere where we have game state game, we are going to be changing that to, I guess we could call it application state, right? Because that's going to be app state, which is technically the application state. And actually, if we look at here, the application specific state is what the comment says, right? So my initial plan was to have, you know, this whole state called, hey, this is the state of the game, but we actually need sort of a separate state for that than we do the application. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to rename this. Let's go down here. And we're going to rename this to... we're going to rename this to, oops. Should we call it application state? I guess that's fine. Yeah, and so that should apply everywhere. All right, and then here what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to find every instance of application state game and rename it to, I guess, app state, right? And then I guess, you know what we should probably do? Instead of having this casting everywhere, this cold casting, right? We kind of did this very early on in the development of Kohi. So we just have a void pointer here, right? But there's not really a reason that it has to be a void pointer. We could just forward declare a struct called application state. and leave that up to the application to actually define. Say the application has to define this, right? And that would mean that all we need to do is just do app state instead of having, you know, game all over the place or whatever, right? Having to perform this cast essentially. Which means we have a lot of code to change, but technically it'd be getting rid of a lot of stuff too. So like we have this application state here, which is just app state. So I think we could probably find and replace 90% of our problems if we do that. So let's take a look at the application struct, which is actually in Kohi itself, right? So that's in the runtime, right? So we have application types. Everything else here is typed, actually, except that, I believe. Yep. We do have an engine state here, but I'm okay with, for now, I'm okay leaving that how it is. So let's go here, and let's forward declare struct application state, right? And then let's go back down here, and we're going to do struct application state. And since it's a pointer to a block of memory, we don't have to have the full type declared there, right? So what that means is that now anywhere in our application, our actual app state is now application state, right? Which is defined here. So what that means is that we should be able to get rid of this, essentially, right? And then just change this to app state, and we get the same thing, right? So I think I guess I'll do a find and replace on game arrow operator and just do app config, right? So we'll do, let's see, game, and then we'll do app state arrow, and we'll do that globally, right? So that's already a bunch of substitutions, right? And then all we should have to actually do is anywhere where we actually previously said, well, in some places it's called state, and other places it's called game. So I guess we should probably fix that inconsistency as well. So any of those sort of cold casts we can get rid of now. So let's go ahead and do that. Got a couple here. These are, I think, few and far between. So I'm not going to do a find and replace on those. And see, even we actually did a cold cast here. Like this kind of thing is not going to be required anymore. In fact, we could just do this, and we're good, right? Thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Welcome. All right. So I'm just going to kind of quickly scroll through here. Oops. So we need app state there and there. Looks like we might have missed one up here. Yep. Okay. All right, so I guess we've got quite a few of these. Looks like a lot of these are ampersand states, so we could probably get away with doing a find and replace on that. So we could do ampersand states, and then ampersand app state globally. Oh, did I do that wrong? State app. Wait a minute. Should be states And then app state. Oh, is this like escaping somehow? Does this need to be escaped? Like regex escaped? Maybe it's this. Oops. No, that doesn't seem to be... Why is it sticking the state in there twice? It should just do, okay, if I do this. Huh? Oh, that's why. Okay. There we go. Okay. That's obviously not worked either. Let's just undo that. There's not that many in here. I'll just fix it. Because the issue is... we already have, you know, state arrow some stuff, right? So we should be able to zip through this pretty fast. I suppose I could record a macro, but this allows me to see each instance of it. Oops. As I do it. I could get fancy with the regex, I suppose, but there's only a few of these around here, so it's just a little bit quicker to sometimes just to do it the brute force way. Okay. And then I guess we need to look for game. Oh, we don't have it anywhere. Okay. Yeah, here we go right here. So... are we just not doing that anywhere? I guess not. What is that? Application state game, right? Okay, I guess we got them all. Oops. Alright, so we don't need cold cast there either. So we can eliminate some of those. Let's see, I guess we could do a quick search for those. I guess though, yeah, we don't need this anymore. Oops. Let's see, we can get rid of all of that. Same here. This will just make everything a little bit cleaner to work with. Sakelis Music, how's it going? Good to see you. Why are you not using a IDE for this? Because I don't really like IDEs. This is about as close to an IDE as I want to get. Good to be seen. Fair enough. Oh, let's see. Hello, what are you doing? Is this C-Lang? Are you developing a game in PRC? Yes and yes. We've written an engine, and thus we are now starting to write the game in C. So what I'm doing right now is actually just a little bit of cleanup on our main sort of game code. And I use that term loosely because we don't have much of it yet. But one of the reasons that I'm doing this is because I'm also trying to kind of take a look at what it takes to make a game with the engine that I've written, and identify pain points and fix them as I go along. So the first game that we're writing is going to take a while, and that's going to be because we're going to have to make round trips between the game engine and the game. And as I resolve those pain points and make the APIs easier to use and stuff like that, the development process will become much quicker. But for now, that's essentially where we're at. So all this cold casting business can go away. Which is always a good thing. You're doing that everywhere, apparently. Okay. All right, so we have a couple of errors here. This should be app state. Missed a couple of those. I think that's it. Okay. All right. I suppose we should probably try to build real quick and just make sure that we didn't miss anything. Incompatible pointer types in testbed main. Oh, I didn't think about that. It's going to break that, isn't it? Okay. Okay. We can fix that real quick. So I guess we can go to where this is declared, and we can do a application state here. Right? And then in here, I guess probably the way that we're going to do this, I'm not going to bother with the cleanup in the test bed for right now. I think I'm just going to do a find and replace. So test bed, game states, and then application states, globally. Okay. That's right, we split out our keybinds and stuff like that, so getting keybinds. So we can do the same find and replace there. And then also game commands. That one doesn't actually look like it needs that. Okay. Perfect. All right. So let's go back to our actual game here. And we built successfully, so now I'm going to use our debugger just to make sure that this still works and what we actually added last night still works. Yep, so there's the triggering of the zone, right? Which actually, now looking at that radius is kind of wide, but we can fix that later. And then go ahead and trigger the zone. We load it into the new zone. Okay. All right, so that all works. So let's go to our application states here and start thinking about how we need to split this up. So first thing I want to look at is we have this vehicle camera and cutscene camera, which we don't want those really called that. right? So there's actually some of this stuff we don't even need in here at all. So position sets. This is changing modes between. Okay. So we can actually go ahead and rename this guy. So I'm going to call this. I guess I'll call this world camera. Yeah, and we'll go with that. And then there's a couple references in here to vehicle. I just want this to be, we'll call the world camera, actually world is the name. And then this is in the application update, has to do with the sound. And so this should actually be renamed to player Xform, right? And then let's see, vehicle camera, this is going to be world camera. Because remember, we have the ability to switch between a world camera and then a editor free camera, right? Which we're going to definitely need that. Okay, so all of that is done. Okay, so things like whether or not we're actually running, what camera we're currently using, those things are fine to leave in the actual application like state, right? Because those are kind of things that we need to know in the application, but it's not something we have to serialize to disk when we go to save the game. The key maps I'm also going to include in there for now, because I think we're going to have to do a little bit of work around key map customization. And then the key map customization is something that we're going to want to save off, but we don't have that yet, so I'm going to leave these here. Current camera is also something that that stays here. Also, the game mode is something that stays here. So that is fine for now. Width and height are just have to do with the window. We should probably eventually get rid of those, but I use those right now for UI positioning. These various system states, these are pointers to the system states for convenience. So all of these things can actually stay here. And this includes our custom game systems, right? So these are pointers to engine systems, right? So we get those upon startup, and then we also have our custom game system states. I guess we could say states. Okay, and then we have our various clocks. Those things can stay here as well. Those are just used for our stuff that appears at the bottom of the screen. So like our FPS, our position, all that stuff. All this stuff down here, that's what that's for. Last updated laps, that's there as well. Render graph, this is something we need to talk about as well, but that stays here as well, as does viewport and UI viewport. Render mode is another thing. And then, let's see, debug stuff to eventually be excluded in release builds. So, yeah, I think that all kind of belongs here. We could probably move that to a separate structure, right? Render mode is actually going to fall under that as well. Because render mode, we probably don't want to allow render mode to be switched in a release build, right? So that should be included in there. So really just our gameplay stuff, I guess, is really just contained down here. I thought there was more of it kind of intertwined, but there's not. So what we can do is instead of having this hack here, we will have a new type def. It'll be a structure, and we're going to say game state, right? And this is going to actually be our game state that we serialize as well. So represents the actual state of the game, serialized to disk on game save. Right, so that's what that's for. Technically speaking, these things don't really apply to that either. Now that I think about it, right? Because these are, well, they do and they don't. They do and they don't. So when we save the game, we do need to know what zone the player's in and where they are in the world and what their rotation is and that kind of thing. So I guess from that perspective, we do need to actually serialize that, but the handle to that transform doesn't necessarily need to be saved here. That could be saved in our application state, and then we could use that to actually update to the game state here. We might wind up moving this. I'm going to put a note here. Maybe only store the final mat 4 or decomposed position, rotation, scale in here. And then context sensitive text, this actually doesn't belong here either. That actually does belong here. So let's change this from hack to note. And then all of this debug stuff, I'm just going to leave there for now. That is a hack. Eventually, we're going to have to turn that stuff off, but I'm not worried about it for now. Let's see. Let me catch up on Twitch. Stream refused to start for me. Only when I reloaded the Twitch page did it show up. Yeah, I had that same thing actually. When I was launching the stream, I actually had to refresh it to see chat, which was weird. Akiyami, thank you for the Prime sub. I didn't hear the notification. I'm sure it probably showed up, but I was kind of in the zone. Thank you so much for the Prime sub. I really appreciate that support. Thank you. Although I don't program in C, it looks very interesting. Looks like a very interesting engine. Yeah. So I took it as a challenge to program this thing in C. Years ago, I probably would have attempted it in C++, but my C++ looked remarkably like C anyways, because I don't use most of the C++ features. And so I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to make it in C. And here we are. All right. All right, so Shy over on the YouTube side. I'm not sure what you mean. Have no idea what you mean by that. Let's see. Trying to do something similar, but for the web using JavaScript. Yeah, I've written game engines in JavaScript and TypeScript before. It's possible, for sure. You can do a lot with it. It's not as powerful as C, obviously, and there's drawbacks and benefits to all of that, but yeah, it's definitely possible. Quick question, if you send per object data via a uniform buffer, not push constants, do you need to double, triple buffer? Yes. So, yeah, you need to. In fact, we do in here. Yeah. So basically my buffers are split into however many sort of subsections I need per frame. So yes, your thinking there is correct, because otherwise you'll have like a read after write or write after read or something like that. You'll have race conditions, which I actually have a couple in the engine I need to eventually fix, but they're pretty minor and don't cause any problems immediately. All right. So, I guess let's talk a little bit about how we are going to represent the player, right? Because the player is kind of this nebulous object that has all sorts of things that need to sort of be tracked, right? And so my first thought behind this is to just essentially have something called player state, right? Why player state and not just player? Well, because the player might wind up actually being some thing that we use for the representation of the player in the world. So the player state is sort of a broader scope of the state of the player beyond what is just present in sort of the physical 3D world. You know, the meshes and the animations and textures and all that stuff. You know, it's going to be things kind of like, I guess we could say U32 health, right? U32 anima, right? It's going to be, you know, our individual sort of resources, right? So our resources, I think we said we're going to have health, anima, and stamina. Right? And then we'll also have, you know, our individual stats. So, you know, our stats could be represented a couple of different ways. We could either represent them as points and then have an algorithm that says each point is worth this much towards whatever stat that it fills. And that's that, right? Which is probably the way that I'm going to go with it. And I'm thinking, when we think about, let me see, do I have the, let me pull up the, let me pull up the document here. If I can get it to go to a different. Here we go. All right. KDE is sometimes a little bit stubborn about the way that tearing off tabs out of the browser works, but, well, I don't know if it's KDE or if it's Firefox. Okay. So, we started talking about stats, right? So we have health, anima, stamina for resources, right? And then we have our attributes / stats, right? Which is strength, agility, mind, and vitality. And this is the most I want to go with this. I don't want a fifth stat. I technically don't even really want 4, but I think this is what we're going to start with. And so these things are sort of our individual attributes that we can sync points into. So I think the way that I'm going to represent this in here is by the number of points, right? So we'll say U8, and then we'll do strength points. And the reason I'm doing that is because if we ever get to a point where, you know, let's say we do some play testing, right? And we've determined like, hey, you know, strength isn't quite as effective as it should be. By storing the number of points instead of the end strength value, this allows me to say, I could basically change that by changing the code, and I don't have to then invalidate people's save games, right? So we also want to obviously avoid that at any and every cost, right? So we want to store the points that are sunk in, not the actual end attribute itself. And that way we could actually just change the calculation if we have to in the code in order to, you know, get what the actual strength is. For example, so we'll have agility points, and then we'll have mind points, and then we'll do vitality points, right? And so this is the kind of stuff that would ultimately wind up getting serialized to disk, right? And I could even say, we could even do technically without these. In fact, those probably shouldn't be there, right? Unless because like we probably shouldn't write out health, right? We should probably calculate health, anima, and stamina based off of these things when we first load, right? But these do need to be maintained. They do need to be maintained. Like the state of them needs to be maintained as the game is played, but you don't necessarily write that out either. So what I mean is, let's say, for example, I don't know, we went out, we did a bunch of questing, we come back into town, we have half health left, right? I could save that, right? But it's kind of not really needed, I guess. If you shut the game down and relaunch it, right, after a save, you'll come back with full health. And more than likely, when we save a game anyways, it's actually going to restore all of these anyway. So I think writing these out probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So like there's going to be properties that we need to serialize, and there's going to be properties we don't need to serialize. So maybe we do one more thing. Player state serializable. Right? And we move these guys into here. Right? And so this is the player state properties that get written to the save file. And we could probably just follow that pattern everywhere, right? So we'll have like a player state serializable. Right? And so everything that needs to be serialized or written to disk would be under serializable. Now, you know, in a lot of other languages where you have things like, what do they call them? Decorators, right? You could just tag it serializable and do it that way. We don't have that in C. And I really don't want to write some sort of preprocessor for all that. It just doesn't really give us all of that much power, right? So it's much easier to just say serialize and write this entire struct, right? And basically what we're going to do is we're just going to write, we're essentially going to just serialize this entire struct as a binary blob to disk. And then when we read it back in, it's going to be the same exact thing, which obviously is going to become a problem if we ever have, you know, more than one version of the save file. And that would be a problem. But we're going to try to only like add things to it, not necessarily remove. All right. Tunify Basic, how's it going? Good to see you. We are kind of laying out how we want to represent the player in the game, among other things. And also thinking about what properties we need to maintain as part of, you know, our running state versus our serializable state, which is what gets written to disk. You see a demo of the engine, or I don't know, just run it. So I could do that. I can run a different project. Okay. Just crashed. That's awesome. Let's try that again. Let me open the old Kohi project. And I can run the test bed just to kind of show you some stuff. This is very early days though, you know, so it's not something I would say that is totally demoable in terms of like having lots of shinies and stuff like that. But let's see if this runs. All right, so obviously one thing that's missing is the terrain. The terrain's currently broken in this build. But what we have is a basic PBR pipeline with cascading shadow maps. And we also have audio. So I don't think you can actually hear it now because I don't have it set up to pipe over. But when the camera enters these spheres, there is audio that plays whenever you enter those. If I go to the terminal here, we can actually see that play and stop playing, right? So we have that. We have our Sponza scene here. That's our basic sort of test in terms of rendering some stuff. So what this is we have a couple of debug modes as well. So we can look at just the lighting only if we wanted to, and see all of these different objects that way. We could look at the normals if we wanted to. We can look at the cascades for the shadow maps if we wanted to see where those cascades lie. We have a wireframe view, and then of course we have our standard view. And so this is just kind of the test bed application that we use to test new features in the engine. So this has a little bit more to display at the moment than the game that we have, but the other thing I should probably mention is, like I said, our terrain isn't currently loaded because we have some work to do in terms of blended materials. The other thing I guess I should probably point out is we do have sort of a lightweight built-in editor. And so we can actually choose objects around the scene, right? And we can actually move them, or we can rotate them, or even, scale them if we wanted to. So let's grab this one, and we could scale it, right? And so, one of the things is that we're going to be building a lot of our editing tools into the actual game itself. And then once we complete the first game, we'll go ahead and extract those to a standalone editor application that utilizes the engine and do it that way instead. But yeah, this is kind of where we're at so far. Everything in here was written from scratch with the exception of a couple of asset importers that we use to read in various image formats. And we translate that to our own internal format that we then load in the runtime. So none of those sort of importers are included with the end runtime. They're just tools only. So as far as what we're looking at here, everything here was written from scratch. Hope that helps. Let's see. Remember I watched some videos of Kohi development a year or more ago. When will you make the first release? After the first game comes out. I'm not going to release the engine. I mean, technically it's available now. Like, you can go and download the source now, right? But it's far from complete. The plan is I will actually cut an official 1.0 release when the first game that it ships using it is released. Because by then I'll know that it's ready to actually make games, because I will have made a game by that point. All right. Kuju, thank you so much for the raid of 27 viewers. I appreciate that. How are you doing? Welcome, raiders. For those of you who don't know who Kuju is, he is another dev here on Twitch who is making a game called Fat Goblins that looks really freaking awesome. And he's writing it in Jai. So shout out to Kuju for sure. Dragon Boss abilities are basically done as of today. Network him next stream. What are you up to today? Awesome. Good stuff. So we are... Oh, I guess... Did that shout out work? Yeah, it did. Okay. My Twitch chat is working a little bit weird tonight. It's like wonky. So tonight we're actually talking about how we want to represent the player both in the world and also our serializable content that we're going to write to disk when we go to save the game, right? So we have some combat mechanics here where we have these resources that are health, anima, stamina, typical things that you'd have as you're progressing through the world, pools of energy or magic energy or health, whatever you want to call it. And then we have our strength, agility, mind, and vitality, and those affect these directly, as well as like your damage and your magical damage and that kind of thing. And so we're kind of starting to lay out what not only the state of some of this stuff is going to look like, but also the serializable state, which is what we have here, in terms of actually writing this stuff out to disk. So, we have an application state, and then within the application state, we have a bunch of sort of global kind of application-specific things. A lot of these are debug that are going to come out. And then we have sort of a game state within that that just keeps kind of a running state of a lot of things. And then within this, we'll have a serializable state as well. And then we'll also have a player state, which is sort of the running state of the player. And then we have a serializable state for the player that gets written to disk. I hope that makes sense. Oh, you already shouted them out. You beat me to it, Spiro. That's why. Okay. I appreciate it. Soulfoam, good to see you. Let me just check on... Looks like I missed some chat, so I'm just going to catch up on that really quickly. Let's see. Okay, question. I'm having to deal with this too in my game, if you don't mind me asking. Let's say you have a piece of armor that has a health buff, where it increases your max health by X amount. How do you create and use a struct to represent your normal health versus your... Wait. Your normal health versus your actual current health, because it's different. So typically, that was actually one of the things I was going to discuss here, is like, typically you have your health, which is kind of your current health, and then you have U32 max health, right? Which is actually what it maxes out at, right? So you have those two values, which I guess we could probably even split these into a structure if we really wanted to, right? We could put can't type tonight. Player, I guess we could just call it character resource or something, right? And then we could say U32 current, right? And then U32 max. And then we could just replace this with character resource health, right? And then you would do health.current, health.max. And then character resource anima, character resource stamina. And then the way that these would be affected is the max would actually wind up being calculated whenever something changes. So whenever you would have a piece of equipment, or you got a buff, or maybe you sank points into one of these guys that modifies one of these, you would just recalculate that and save that value into here, right? So there'd be a function essentially that you would call that checks all of those different things and says, based off essentially the player state, what is my current max health? What is my current max anima? What is my current max stamina? And that's essentially the way that would work. So I don't know that it would be a struct that would represent that in and of itself. But yeah. I noticed dragging tabs out of Brave was much smoother than Firefox. Moved off Firefox due to recent events. Yeah, and I'm going to be doing the same, honestly. You could invert it to store damage taken, then compare that to base plus all the buffs when needed. That's true. Although I would usually recalculate max based off of an event, and that event can be a bunch of different things, right? And that event should also basically scan everything every time every time it happens. So that way you're always sure that it's up to date, right? Are all assets loaded all at once or dynamically streamed? We load them as we need them. We don't have asset streaming yet, but Yeah, we just load them as we need them. Okay. All right, cool. I think I'm caught up now. All right. So I guess we would probably have something to calculate that as well, right? So I guess we could kind of think about a little bit about, anyways, like what kind of things that we'd want to represent that would affect that, right? So there'd be some stuff that would be in player state that would affect it, and then there'd be some stuff in player state serializable that would affect it. So things that would go in our serializable would be things like equipped gear, right? Technically, inventory in general goes here, right? Something I probably would not save would be like a debuff, right? So something like a debuff would be here. Buffs, debuffs, right? Because you don't need to write that out, right? So something like equipped gear and inventory, that's something that needs to persist across a save, whereas a buff or a debuff doesn't need to. Now, we could argue if you use a potion that has an hour long buff, and then you immediately have to turn the game off, then that maybe we should save that, right? So this, maybe we have both, right? Okay. So I guess the next thing that we're going to need to know is in our player state serializable, we're also going to want to know let's see, we're probably going to want to know like the zone that we're in, right? But the zone system works purely by name, right? So I guess we could store a K name of the zone, right? Right. I guess that would be current zone name, which would just be written as an integer. But since the zone system has the names of all of the zones, the K name itself would have already been created with that string during the boot up phase. So I think this is fine to do here. So we'd need to know the current zone name, and then probably what we would need to do is we would probably want to save off the transform. Thank you for the follow, by the way. I appreciate that. We'd probably want to save off the transform, but I don't think I'd want to save it as a composed mat4. I think I'd probably want to do... thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Welcome. I think I'd probably want to do, vec3 position, quat rotation, and I guess we could save scale too. I think that's kind of probably not necessary for the player. Because the only thing that would ever affect scale is potentially a buff or a debuff, right? We're not going to save that. We're just going to do position rotation. And then we'll always assume some form of scale in the code, right? Okay. So we have that. What other things would we need to know? So this will be the zone that we're loading into. This is where within the zone that we load into. Obviously, equipped gear and inventory are things as well. The number of points that we have in our attributes. And then there's also a big one, which is quests. And that is going to be kind of an interesting system that we're going to have to come up with, right? Because we're going to have, we're essentially going to wind up with a database of quests. And that database of quests is going to have, at least at a minimum, one flag, right? But potentially multiple flags and counters and other things like that. And so we'll have to figure out how we actually want to save that, because that's going to vary heavily depending on what, the type of quest that we do, and so forth. Hey, just stopping by. I see Vim and C, so I'm in. Awesome. First time chatter. Welcome. Appreciate that. All right. So quests, I think, is something we're definitely going to have to talk about. So one thing that we did talk about in this game is, I want to just re-highlight this. There's not going to be any levels or EXP in general for any of our systems, right? So we're dispensing with that. Our progression is basically going to be better gear and better attributes or stats, and that's it. We'll look into things like how do we get awarded those points. I'm thinking they're actually going to be looted items at this point that you use. But, we definitely don't want to do the traditional sort of like level-based combat everywhere, because that's kind of overdone, right? So I was just thinking of something else that that we needed to add. What was it? Was it in here? Stats increasing only occur upon collection of special use items. We have to go into a certain dungeon to get a vitality increase, etc. Yes, that makes sense. Equipable items. That wasn't it. Oh, there's a couple of other stats we might want to track, right? And there's actually, this could probably be like in the global sort of serializable game state, which we don't actually have yet. So let's go ahead and add that. Game state serializable, right? So one thing that I was thinking of that might be kind of neat to have would be a timer, right? How long we've actually played the game. And so there's a couple ways we could actually represent that. I'm thinking probably the cleanest way to do that is going to be probably the number of seconds, right? So we could just do like a U64 time played seconds, right? And so we'd have that, and then we can put in here game state serializable. And then in our application state, we're going to need a couple things. So we have, let's see, the game state would be here. This player states probably ought to move to here. Right, to our player state. So our game state has, I guess, some other properties. I don't really know what's going to go in there just yet, but it'll have our serializable properties for one thing. And then it'll also contain our player state. Right? And then the player state contains our serializable state, which is here. Right? Okay. So that's that. Let's see, what else do we want to add in here potentially? Items, equipment. I'm just kind of thinking high level at the moment. Oh, I suppose what spells we've unlocked, right? So we could put... I guess that would also be here. Abilities, spells, unlocked. Right? Because we're going to get more of those as we progress through the game. Skills. Yeah, so it's like our... We're not really going to have a skill tree per se. I guess it's... Yeah, abilities, spells, skills, I guess is kind of all there. This would also includes crafting, right? So we'll have to make a fairly large structure when we start implementing those various things. And I think all of those should be under serializable, right? Because those need to persist. And then the things that don't need to persist are like these guys here. I'm really on the fence as to whether buffs and debuffs should persist. I'm almost kind of feeling like I'm going to split the difference. Like buffs should persist, but debuffs shouldn't. Diamond, how's it going? Prayers, maybe? Yeah, I mean, it's like, that's like a buff, right? Or like a, we've got like a few of those in here. You know, debuffs, curses, dots, buffs, blessings, hots, right? Movement configuration would be something that's serializable. We don't need to worry about that right now, though. It's going to be a bit before we get to that. This is going away. We're not doing this. As much as I think it would be cool, I think it's going to actually kind of go against... kind of what we want to do. Where is... I know it's in here somewhere. Strike through. Enchantments, that's kind of an item property. Mounts, don't know if we're going to do that. Companions, maybe, maybe not. Okay, I guess that's pretty much it, right? This is done. That's naming ideas. Okay. I think we might be. I think we might be good. Okay, this is all of our... All right. So I think we're good for now, obviously with these big to-dos, right? So when we go to tackle the inventory system, we'll do inventory when we go... And we'll probably do equipped gear at the same time. Whoops. We'll probably do equipped gear and inventory at the same time. In fact, those are kind of the same item, almost, right? When we go to design quests, we'll obviously handle that. And then eventually we'll need non-serializable game state kind of properties as well. Okay. So... I think we actually have, because of how we've moved this stuff around, we're going to have some errors here to fix in our game code. So this is kind of part of our hack to get the player X form from the scene. This is what we eventually need to handle via like prefabs or something else. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and do states. Let's see. Did we not add this stuff to application state? I guess we didn't. Let's see, gameplay stuff. That should probably be under game state also. Gameplay specific stuff, right? So let's do game state here. What do we want to call it though? I guess we could do state.game is fine. So if we do states game player, right? Player X form. We probably ought to have some sort of quicker way to access that, even if it's just a macro that does all of this stuff. Because that's kind of annoying to have to drill down through all of that. But in order to keep our data straightened around, we're going to need it, right? So we could do that here. We can do that there, there. Oops. And there. This fix me is going to be resolved by some of the scene stuff I want to talk about. So we'll come back to that. I think this is also, this is just under game context, I think. So let's go ahead and change that. And let's go to the next one. Context sensitive text. Oh, is that actually a... That's an SUI control. I guess that's... We can, I guess, leave that in application config, I guess, for now. This is kind of like UI state, which we don't really have yet. All right, so this is going to be state game player. And then this is going to be the same thing. Same thing. Okay, so this is actually, I'm going to have to undo this. And undo that. All right. I would argue health should persist, else people will log out when low in life. So that's the thing. I got thinking about that, right? We are not going to autosave. Especially if you log back in where you left. So you are logged back in where you left, kind of, right? But the way that it's going to work is, I don't know if we talked about this or not. There are only going to be certain parts that you can save. So you can't save in like a dungeon, right? You'll have to go to certain locations around the world to actually be able to save. So when you save, saving is also going to heal you and restore all of your attributes, right? Or all your resources. So it technically doesn't matter at that point. Yeah. My code base has hacks. Yours has to-dos. We're not the same. I have plenty of hacks as well. I have a fix me here, a hack. I mean, to do, there's 460 of them. I guess I could do this, right? 416, right? And then hack, there's 55 of them. Right? Fix me, 68 of them. Yeah. Should add 7 TTV emotes in here. If I can figure out how to do that, I can do it. But I'm a bit of a noob when it comes to some of those things. I have no idea how to actually do it. You can post on your Discord about it for the next stream. It'll be good. Okay. Yeah, I can do that. Feel free to ping me so that I don't lose sight of it. But yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate that. Don't want to derail. Yeah, fair enough. All right. So do I want to jump into displaying any of this or handling any of this stuff right now or not? I don't think so. One thing that I kind of would like to do is we have these key maps set up. And we're not 100% using them correctly, right? So we have like these game move forward, backward, left, right, up, down, those things, right? But those are actually only affecting the editor camera, right? Which is not exactly what we want. And then actually, I guess I could just do, let's see. Right. Then we also have this in our sort of application update. That happens as well, right? And so essentially what we do is we kind of analyze this to build up a velocity and or apply a rotation, and we do just kind of do that in line here. And the problem with that obviously is that these aren't reconfigurable. If we wanted to add extra keys to our map to do the same thing, we can't do that, etc. So we need to actually change up the way that this works, right? Because this is hack, again, player movement, right? Should be stored elsewhere. Actually, this is actually a good candidate of something to move too. So we could store that in the player state, right? Because technically speaking, your movement speed is something ideally that should be calculated, right? Because we might have a buff that makes you run faster or something like that. Turn speed, probably not so much. Although I don't even know if turn speed is going to be relevant in the long term, right? Because eventually we're going to hook this up so that when you're playing with a mouse and keyboard, you aim according to where the mouse is actually facing relative to your character. And when you're using one of these guys, well, I guess, yeah, turn speed would be relevant. No, it actually won't be, because the left stick will be for movement and the right stick will be for direction. And you'll just instantly snap to whatever direction you're moving, this joystick to. So movement speed is or turn speed is not actually going to wind up being a thing. Do items affect movement speed? They can, yes. So that's something that technically should be calculated, not just, obviously not hard-coded here, right? That was why I had the hack there, but that's probably something, well, I guess an item, probably the way I would do it would be, if you were to use an item that affected movement speed, it would give you a buff. And then the buff would affect movement speed. Right, so I guess we'd have like a base movement speed that would have to be defined somewhere, which actually makes me think about something else. Where do we put things like this that are sort of global constants, as it were, right? That, I feel like, probably shouldn't be part of state, but like probably should be part of that should probably be, I guess, an application state. We could put it in game state too, right? We could do something like that. Maybe we put it in game state. That seems a little bit more explicit, right? Because application state is like for, is the application running? What's our window size? That kind of thing. Maybe we have something else where we have game constants, right? And in that, we have F32 base movement speed, right? And then I guess I'll put turn speed in there for right now because we do need it until I actually get some of these other control schemes hooked up. So we'll do turn speed, right? And we'll put a to-do, another one. Get rid of this in favor of mouse position based rotation / gamepad right stick rotation. And then the game constants would be probably in the game state, right? So we'd have our serializable here, and then we'd have game constants, right? Which we just call constants. And then I guess on boot up, we would want to set some of this stuff, right? So I guess on application boot, probably before we do any of this stuff, we'd probably want to set up game constants, right? So this would be, we do app states game constants. And I guess we should probably just do this just to make it a little easier, right? And then we can do constants base movement speed equals 5.0f, right? And constants turn speed equals 2.5f. And that way, we have somewhere to actually configure this, right? Because this doesn't need to be like an app config thing, I don't think. Although I suppose it certainly could be. But then we'd have to deserialize all of that, and we could just set it in code, right? I think it makes sense to keep it where we have it. In my game, I have a second struct that is the stats of the player that are calculated each frame and updated. It's things like movement speed and resistance and damage to different types of stuff. Things that change but not every frame, and they are loaded at runtime based on items, base stats, and buffs. Yeah, so I was thinking about that, right? But like, does that really need to be done every frame? Or could it be event-based? So if we don't need to be updating that every frame, why would we, right? So what I'm thinking is in terms of event-based is like, when we equip something, kick off an event that says, hey, we've equipped a new piece of gear, run the calculations. You know, when we have a buff that's applied or a debuff that's applied, run the calculations. Some things are event-based, some are not. Basically a lookup table for all the stuff that the stats are initially, and then a struct for the runtime data that will change based on the game. Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to debate. Like, I'm trying to think of a reason why everything couldn't be event-based. and I'm not coming up with anything. My game code handles how, is that TI is modified? Oh, it is modified is I assume what you meant. Yeah, so I do have the struct of data that will change based on like the game itself, right? So that's like the base player state, right, versus the serializable state. The resources are an example of that, right? But like these points, like whenever this changes, for example, changing that would be an event that kicks off that says, okay, recalculate these guys. It's one of those things that it's just like whatever your gut feeling is, probably be just fine. There's a million ways you could slice this one. Yeah, I feel like that too. I feel like I'm probably overthinking it at this point. I feel like events will probably be enough. I don't think I need to do it every frame. I mean, I suppose I could, but I really don't think I need to. So yeah, I think I'm going to do it event based. At least in my case, it's actually more efficient to calculate every frame some of the things versus event based. So that's kind of interesting. Why would that be, Diamond? How would it be more efficient? You split it up based on evaluation. So you're saying based on evaluation of FPS impact. Isn't it the same as events? That's what I was wondering. You'd evaluate it and then just call the event. Yeah, because I feel like any event, I would just recalculate all of it, right? And it'd be a quick enough thing to do. Just not something I'd want to do every single frame, but like if you equipped a new chest piece or something like that, then fine, it just runs all the calculations. If you, I don't know, step in a pool of lava or something, you could do it then too. Take damage, you could do it then too. So that has a lot of pointer hopping. True. Which is also a reason I wouldn't necessarily want to do it every frame, though. Because events like that aren't going to happen every frame. They'll happen, not every stat. I also can't imagine that the calculations are all that complicated. Things like movement speed and resistance are event-based. Yep. Damage is every frame. Well, yeah, damage makes sense. No, actually. Damage does not even need to be that way. Damage could also, and probably should also, be an event. Technically. Might have shot myself in the foot, but I have a lot of stats and modifiers. Yeah, that's one thing I'm trying not to overdo. I'm trying to keep the systems, as far as that goes, relatively simple. Outside impacts that can change every frame, which needs me to do every frame. So do you mean like environmental stuff? Because I still feel like if you're standing in an AoE and you get blasted by it, right? That's still an event. I don't think you have to do that every frame. You could check to see if it's hitting you every frame, right? But like when an AoE does hit you, you generally do it once when it first hits, and then maybe as it ticks every second or so. But you don't need to do that continuously every single frame. I still feel like it's still an event. I could be wrong, but the way I'm thinking about it up here is it's still an event. Okay, so we now don't need this anymore. And so we can do, I guess I'll just do constants here. Constants equals app, actually the address of app states game constants, right? And then we can do constants base movement speed. And obviously that'll have multipliers and stuff that goes with it, right? I'm just using that for now because we don't actually have a movement speed, right? We could do we could also do, and probably should do, instead of serializable, it would be another player state thing. And this could probably be F32 movement speed multiplier, right? And we could always just sort of default that to 1.0 and then modify that based on some event, right? Missed a negative sign once, did I? I don't think so. Oh, you're saying you missed one once. I gotcha. I've been fighting with myself, written math library all day just to find out I flipped the numerator with the denominator in term of the perspective matrix. Ooh, that's brutal. That is the definition of dingus-oriented programming. I've done it. Too many times to count. Would have figured it out if you just wrote and written tests. Yeah. That is something I'm eventually going to have to do too, for sure. This is just going to be constants. Oops. Dang it. I keep hitting the wrong key. There we go. All right, so this is going to be... Did it again. All right. Constants, turn speed. Okay. So now the player movement should probably be moved. We should probably also think about player initialization, right? Because we actually have these states. We kind of need to, first of all, load some defaults, right? That are just going to allow things to run before we even load a game, so that we've got something there. And then when we load a game, recalculate some of this stuff. Let's see. My tests were staring at the clear color of the back buffer all day. At least it's not a black screen, right? Unless your clear color is black. I learned not to do that in OpenGL, back in the OpenGL days. Wait, you guys write tests? I do technically have tests in here. Are they thorough? Question mark, but they do exist. Did not write a lot of tests when I wrote C because it was a bit more annoying. I just wrote a small framework to handle it, and it's pretty straightforward, honestly. Use gray as the clear color. That's one of the reasons I always use like some sort of off color, like blue or magenta or green or something like that. 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. Yeah, that works too. Mine is magenta. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this application is... It's just blue. Oh, that's the test bed. And then this one is this green color. The sort of Windows 95 desktop green from back in the day. So yeah, I change it also so that I know, like, immediately when I launch it if I'm running the wrong program like I just did. All right, so let's, where do we do player initialization? Or I guess it would be creation, and then initialization would happen when we load, right? When we load a save file, which we don't even have yet. So I think application initialize is probably going to be where we're going to want to do that. Register for events, blah, 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 blah. Here's our custom systems. I guess this kind of falls under this same kind of idea. Maybe just put it here, right? Order doesn't really matter all that much. Player state initialization. Nope, that's not what I wanted. All right, so here we do app state game, oops, player, and I probably just do player state, right? And let's take the address of that, right? And then do player, let's see. I guess we could set like all of the defaults, right? So this is not taking into account anything having to do with save files or stats or any of that stuff. So we could do movement speed multiplier equals 1.0. So at least we've got something valid there. Let's put it up here. Note, this is before the save file is loaded, just to have some defaults in place. Okay, so that was the most important one we needed. We could also fill out some of the other ones. You know, like health max equals player health currents equals 100, right? Whatever, stuff like that. Let's see. Now we just need to write a quaternion implementation on HLSL to end the day. Yay. Wait, why would you write a quaternion implementation in HLSL? Unless you're doing like some compute thing. Oh, all right, called it. Yep. Doing your transforms on a compute shader. Fair enough. All right. I guess we could just do this really quickly. Anima and stamina, just so we have something in there for now. All right. Now that we have that, we should probably also take that into account here. So let's also take, oops, player states. Right, and then we can go here and do player movement speed modifier, or multiplier rather. And we can put that in here a couple times. That way, at least we're taking that into account. We don't have to think about it later. All right, so now we basically need to move or migrate this code down to our input events, right? However, there's one more bit of this, right? So we have this velocity, and then we have this rotation. And if we move these down to that section of code, then we're not going to have the ability to say, we're not going to have the ability to just query this on the fly in the middle of the update routine, right? So we've got to store this and this somewhere. And so I feel like that is something else that would go into the player state. So we can put this... We should probably put this into some sort of frame state, right? Which is going to be a per frame player state, which is sort of a sub player state again. And this is going to be a state that gets zeroed out either at the beginning of every frame or at the end of every frame after everything's processed. Probably at the beginning of the frame is when we'll do it. So we'll do player frame state. Player frame states, right? And so this would have things like vec3 velocity, right? And quat rotation. And then essentially what we would do is we would take these two rotations, multiply them together, and then apply it this way, right? To get the final sort of frame rotation. So let's put player frame state, right? And then in application updates, probably even before we do anything else like this stuff, we'll do reset the player frame states, right? So we'll just scope this, and then we'll do K0 memory. Oops, no, before we do that, actually, let me hoist these two things up here. Here. So let's do K0 memory. We're going to do player frame state, size of player frame state. Oh, I need the address of that. Okay. So we'll zero it out, but then one thing that we do have to do as well is we have to set the rotation to be identity quaternion, right? Always reset the rotation to be identity. So we don't divide by 0. Right, so we'll just do player frame states rotation equals quat identity. Right? So we zero the whole structure out, then we set that explicitly. And then down here is where we will actually retrieve that from. So I'm going to do, I guess I'll apply that here, right? So instead of velocity, we're going to have player frame state velocity, right? And then instead of doing the rotation like this, like a one-off, we're going to do this. Should probably apply velocity first. Or I guess we could apply rotation first. That's fine. All right, so we could do that, and then instead of just rotation, it's going to be player frame state rotation, right? And then all that these things actually have to do is just write to these guys now. So the only issue with that is going to be delta time. So if we take the delta time out of here and just multiply it at this point, I think that'll be fine. So what we really need to do here think about how I want to do this. This one is just a simple matter of, whoops. This one's just a simple matter of doing a vec3 mole scalar, right? And then just doing delta right there, right? So that one's nice and easy. So delta can come out of these guys. And we'll just scale it here. And then as far as turn speed, we're creating the axis angle here. But this is always against the y-axis, so I guess we could just hack it and just multiply the y-axis by that, I think. And that should be sufficient. I know why I have some things computed every frame. My damage calculation code for the player is the same as it is for the monsters, and my pre-calculation... In pre-calculation, my state is only 15 long, but post-calculation, I need around 400. So instead of storing these states and ruining my cache hits, I recalculate them every frame. Player just so happens to also have to do it. Okay, so I probably am not going to wind up doing monster stats that way. Not exactly. I think the calculation for that's going to wind up being different. Are Kohi matrices row major or column major? Column major. It's cool to be able to ask directly to the author. Yeah, they're column major. I actually fixed a bunch of bugs in that somewhat recently, because I had a couple of functions in there that I realized were row major instead of column major. Seems very specific for my game. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? Because at that point, you're doing the extra logic is actually probably going to be cheaper than it would be to take the cache hits and the memory reads. So yeah, in that case, it does make sense. We're not going to have that same issue, though. All right. What was I saying I was just going to do? Okay. To apply the rotation, scale y rotation by turn speed. So we do player frame state rotation dot y, and we're just going to hack it here, right? Times equals delta. Delta, right? That'll allow us to get rid of that and that. So now all we have to do is move these down and we should be good to go. So I guess I'll move it We'll go to move forward, I guess. It's the first one we'll do. So the way that these are going to have to work is we're going to have to examine what the game mode is first, which is a little annoying. But it is what it is. So let's see. This is behind my head here. Yeah. Okay. Editor camera forward move speed. Okay. So, and then get engine delta time. Well, if I'm already doing that there, then I don't have to do all this fanciness up here. We could just scale it on the fly as we need to. We don't even have to do this then. All right, let me just do it that way. That way, by the time it gets up here, it's already scaled and everything where it needs to be. All right, so let's do this, right? And for the editor camera, it's fine. We're not going to use velocity or anything for that. We're just going to move the camera directly. However, when we are in world mode, we are not going to do that. We are going to apply velocity, right? So let's do, let's see, W is going to be forward. So this is going to be app state game player frame state velocity. Okay, that's really annoying to have to type all that. So let's actually do this. Player frame states equals the address of that. And then I can just do frame state velocity, right? Same thing goes here. Frame states velocity. And then let's see, forward. We have, now I'm remembering why I hacked this, right? This is kind of annoying, but not the end of the world. Okay, so I guess we'll do, what do we need the player position for? I think we need that for this later down here. So this can stay here. Oh, we actually do need that. Okay, so that has to stay there. And then I guess all we have to do is extract the forward or the right, depending on what we're doing, and then delta is there. Okay, so we'll have to do this, right, to get the player X form. And then we'll have to get the forward vector here for this one. And then, oh, constants. We don't have constants either. Okay. So I can copy pasta that one too. What else are we missing? Player movement speed multiplier. Oh, okay. Fine. We'll do this. Right, and then we'll just do that. Okay. So that could use a little bit of work in terms of how we get that stuff, because that's a little annoying to have to do that every single time. So we might want to think about that a little bit better. Maybe we cache it somehow. I'm going to put a pin in it so we can move on. To do, this is annoying. Simplify it. Okay. But we essentially need to do the same thing for the other directions, right? So S is essentially going to be the exact same. It's just negative movement speed, right? So we can actually just take this section for backward, apply it there, and then go here and just negate the movement speed, right? Technically, we could have negated forward or whatever if we wanted to as well, but okay. Let's see. Do we want to allow for strafing? I'm going to say yes. All right, so we'll paste this. We're going to have to change some stuff. So for this one, we are going to want to use the right vector. So we need this. Right, and this is going to be right. And it's going to be negative, which is perfect. It's already negative. Okay. So that's that. And then obviously left. No, right movement is going to be positive version of that. So we just need to remove that. All right. So that's that. And then A and D actually perform rotation. So these are going to be, let's see, do we actually have turn right and turn left? I don't think we do. Editor key map has it. Game on yaw. Is that actually bound anywhere? It's bound in our editor key map. Okay, so that's what we're going to have to change. I don't think, though. So that's our editor key map. Where is our... Our world mode key map doesn't have any of this stuff, actually. So let's change game on yaw. I guess this is fine. The only thing that we have to do here is instead of a straight up camera yaw, we are going to have to generate a rotation. So if A oh, interesting. Okay, so for the rotation of the camera, this is actually opposite. Because if we look here, when we generate our axis angle rotation, A goes negative and D goes positive, but here it's opposite. Okay. So let's do this first of all. And then we'll generate a rotation. Right? But what we're going to do is we have constants. Let's see, we need this. And we also need, actually I think we just need this. So constants is here. All right, and so A is just turn speed times delta speed. Delta time, rather. Let me think. And then we have the F modifier. So what we actually are going to want here is we're going to want negative F times get engine delta time times turn speed. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. All right, and then what we'll have to do is we'll have to update. So we're going to want, we are going to need players. We are going to need the player. Let's put that here. And then we can say player frame states rotation equals quat mul. And we're going to take player frame state rotation as the first one, and the second one is just going to be rotation. And that's how we're going to apply it, right? So we've got that, and that's pretty much going to be the same thing as, actually that's it, because we're not going to bother with pitch. Pitch is not actually going to affect player movement. I might split those out to be completely separate functions, actually, at some point. But for now, it's a little bit easier to just set it up this way. Okay, so what we also need to do is take these key maps, and I'm actually just going to copy these and move them up here to the world mode key map. And I'm actually going to, just to make sure that we don't have any copy pasta issues, I'm going to scope these. Probably should have done that a while ago. Let's see. Okay. So let's do this one, and then here. All right. So we're going to take this one. All of these, let's see. Up and down are not actually going to be used, so we'll get rid of those. And then all the ones we have to worry about are here. So let's do this. World key map. And then pressing and holding the buttons is going to act exactly the same way as it did before. So now those are actually in. Now those are actually in the proper key map. So what we should be able to do is essentially do that. And I suspect we actually are probably not going to need some of these other things too. Let's see. I don't even know if we need delta beyond this. No, we don't. Okay. So those we don't need. Player position we do need, because that gets modified down here. All right, let's try and build this. Unused variable constants, 446. Oh, I guess we didn't wind up. I'm just going to comment that out for now. Guess we didn't wind up using that after I removed all that other code. Okay, let's see if our movement works. Nada. Our editor camera works, but this one doesn't, and that makes me wonder. World key map. It is. I wonder why that's not working. I don't see anything. We don't have to hold any modifiers. They're all on bind type hold, meaning when you press and hold the key down. Change current camera. So when we change the camera, if we're in editor mode and we switch back to game world, we pop the old map. Either way, we pop the old map and push a new one. So why wouldn't any of our... We are getting this from here. Oh, I think I know why. I think I know why. This is an order of operations issue, I believe. So, in our engine loop, the very last thing that's done, if I remember correctly, is input. So, technically, that input needs to be applied to the next frame, which means resetting the player frame state at the beginning of the frame is the wrong thing to do. It needs to be at the end of the frame. Which I guess it would be... Yeah, heck with it. Let's go all the way down to the end of the frame. Actually, can I even do it there? That's an interesting conundrum, because actually even all the way at the end of the update loop isn't going to be late enough. Well, maybe it will. Maybe it will be. Maybe it'll be okay. As long as we don't read the frame state after this, the player frame state after this point, we'll be okay. Yeah. Whoa. Check out that warp speed. All right. So obviously we've got a little bit of work there to do, but it does seem to do the thing anyways. So let's go to let's go to here and see if we can't figure out why that is not. Oh, because I didn't reapply the engine delta time. That's why. So let's actually take this and go up here and do F32 delta equals that. And then here we could just do delta times that, and then delta. So yeah, we didn't reapply the delta time after we removed it before. So we need that there. What did I do up here? I just did delta first, right? Yeah, so all right, so times delta times delta times delta delta times delta. Okay, there we go. Now we have same movement, but now it's actually going through the key maps as it should be. So that's much better. We can still warp to the other zone. Perfect. All right. So the only other thing I want to do really quickly is remove all of this. Okay, and this is no longer a hack, right? So this is going to be, oops, handle, player, and camera movement. All right, cool. Eventually, this will probably be moved off somewhere else out of the main application code and actually just, you know, wherever we put the rest of our player-specific logic is probably where this is going to live. But for now, it works. Okay, so we got some good planning in place. We've got some good structures in place in order to allow us to start handling our player state a little bit better. I think we've made some good improvements for sure tonight. Let's see, let me just catch up on chat real quick. Another cheeky thing I did is most of my state is integers pretending to be floats, where it's just 2 decimal floats times 100. I mean, I get it. That's actually kind of a common thing to do for it's kind of a common thing to do when you're dealing with money, right? Currency. Can definitely tell you used to be a single letter variable input name guy with the X form instead of transform. So X form, actually, there's a reason behind the name of X form. I don't think you were here when that was done. So we had a transform system that got replaced by the X form system. But the two were sort of existed side by side while I was doing that. And so I couldn't call them both transform systems. So I called the new one X form system and the old one transform system. Then I got everything moved over to the X form system and removed the transform system and meant to go actually rename X form back to transform and never wound up doing it. Although that's going to come to a head here pretty soon because we are actually going to switch up our transform system once again. But we'll talk about that on the next stream probably. Can't believe it actually worked the first time. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, right? Happens sometimes. Stole an idea from Path of Exile, where damage over time stuff is in damage per minute and stored as integers rather than damage per second or lower. I suppose if you had buffs that lasted that long, I suppose that makes sense. I feel like damage per second's a little easier to think about up here. Although if you store it in damage per minute, I suppose that does make sense, as long as you could always, convert it for display purposes. That is interesting, though. All right. So that is pretty much going to do it for our stream tonight. Yeah, they have different tick rates. That makes sense. Yeah, I have to get up and work early in the morning, so I'm going to look for somebody to raid. But yeah, thank you guys so much for being here and hanging out and chatting with me. Appreciate you guys. And we are going to raid El's Dragoon because they are still online. So these guys are making a Nintendo game on the original NES and 6502 assembly. So with that, we're going to go ahead and raid them, and I will see you guys in the next stream. See ya.